Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics and Radamic. Berto Will is your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. Welcome to Dimitri OG. Hola, hermano, ¿cómo estás? AVQ, welcome aboard. And of course, there is Michael Rudnin. How are you guys doing today? We're going to have a great show. We have a long show, so we got to move on and no bunch of little talking right away. So let's get busy. Today we talk. Author Russell Heath talks progressive balkanization. We talk about Portland fascism, and AOC slams Yoho. And let me tell you, I am going to play that entire speech. I cut the back and the front because you don't want all the official stuff, you know. But that is a speech every woman needs to hear, every American man needs to listen to from the point of patriarchy and everything. This new generation of women, I love them because they are taking nothing. Nancy Pelosi, you could see the proudness in her step as this young woman, AOC, somebody that she's not even very politically aligned with in totality. You could see that she felt great that this woman confronted men the way she did for their intransigence, for their misogyny, for how we have been for too damn long. It was great to see, but anyhow, let's get busy. So the title, Author Russell Heath talks progressive balkanization, Portland fascism, AOC slams Yoho. Author Russell Heath talks about the dangers of progressive balkanization. DHS Secretary spins Trumpist fascist act in Portland, and AOC slams misogynist Ted Yoho on House floor. Russell Heath brought some important points to the progressive debate. He talked about progressive needing to work together for our causes. His observations are prescient, especially now. Russell Heath, former government state lobbyist in Alaska, is the author of Rin's Crossing, a novel that sometimes details the tribulations and shenanigans he went through. We also discussed Trump's fascist attack, of course, and AOC. So let's go ahead right now and get busy, folks. We're going to start with, I want you to watch what occurred in Portland and how the guy, what's his name, Wall or whatever his name is, the DHS secretary, talked about it. You could see it's political, and he was called out. Señores y señoras, this is what it's all about. This is the way journalism works. Check this out.
Acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf joins us now. Mayor of Portland was tear gassed last night while he was meeting with protesters, and the protests themselves seem to have gotten larger since the UR agents went in. Are they actually inflaming the situation?
No, absolutely not. What we know is before DHS civil law enforcement officers arrived in Portland, the mayor is on record as saying that the city it has a certain level of violence.
Well, why do you think they don't want you there, Mr. Secretary?
Well, again, I think there's confusion on what we are doing in Portland. We are there to protect the federal courthouse. What makes Portland so different from every other country, we protect over almost 9,000 facilities across the country. Portland is the only city where a protester can a violent criminal can stand on the other side of the street. Portland is the only city where a violent criminal could stand on the other side of the street and lob a Molotov cocktail at the courthouse, and there's no repercussion for that from a law enforcement perspective. They need to do their job, they need to enforce the law, they need to work with us and make sure that we hold violent criminals accountable for criminal activity.
Mr. Secretary, the Oregon Attorney General said that masked federal agents have arrested people on streets far from the courthouse with no probable cause and whisked them away in unmarked cars.
We have a direction from not only the Congress, but it's in federal statute. We protect that courthouse, and we have the ability to make arrests.
So you are going beyond the courthouse.
And we have the absolutely express right and authority to do that.
Mr. Secretary, a dozen mayors of major cities in this country have called this an abuse of power. The first Secretary of Homeland Security, Tom Ridge, said the department was established to protect Americans from global terrorism. It was not established to be the president's personal militia. Secretary Chertoff, who succeeded him with President George W. Bush, also a Republican, by the way, said the DHS appears to be overstepping its mission, and this is very unsettling.
But they're wrong on this point.
What directive did you give your agents when you sent them in?
I have given them no direction. Federal Protective Service, the director there, the deputy director, the on-scene director, they are controlling the actions of DHS law enforcement officers.
Mr. Secretary, the president is talking about sending agents into other cities. They are all, by the way, Democratic cities, which is part of the reason the administration is being accused of a political act here, essentially. You're not talking about, there are Republican cities with increased violent crime rates, but the president hasn't talked about any of those.
What the president is referring to, what the Department of Justice talked about yesterday and 2 weeks ago, is Operation Legend, which is more your violent criminal activity, street crime that you see with gangs, drug dealers, and the like. What we're doing in Portland has nothing to do with that type of criminal activity. What we're talking about in Chicago, Albuquerque, and other cities, Kansas City, is violent criminal activity, again, gangs, drug dealers, and the like.
I don't know if you guys saw how he just messed up there. Really, right there at the end, the guy said, "Well, what happened to the Republican cities where crime rates are going up as well?" And he says, "Well, you guys don't understand Portland. We're going into Chicago and all of that for gang violence and other violence." That's what the guy said. How comes you only chose the Democratic cities for the grand audience? Well, I don't know. I can't stop it at this point in time. I hope it's not too bad. But anyhow, let's go ahead and say this, folks. This is important. This part is very important. If you notice, they have a mission that they have to do. Their mission is that we must call it. We can't call it protesters. We have to call them criminals. We can't call them protesters. We call them criminals. Take a look at what's going on. That is what they're talking about, and it is crazy. As far as the audio is out of sync, I hope it's not more than about a second or so, because I don't know what's going on there, but I can't stop at this point because we're too deep into the thing and for timing purpose. Anyhow, let's go ahead. By the way, for those who can't get that little bit of sync off, this stuff is going to be reprocessed as well and played later on as well. Anyhow, continuing with the program, I want you to listen now to, further ways. You notice what he did with regards to the criminalization. They wanted to make sure they used criminal and not protesters. And he did that distinctly. Now, I want you to listen to this. AOC, a few days ago, was confronted by that Congressman Yoho, Ted Yoho. Ted Yoho was really rude to her, and he just showed that he just didn't know how to deal with assertive women. Check this out, and I'm giving you the entire speech. It's about 8 minutes or so, or a little bit longer. Here we go.
Acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf joins us now. Mayor of Portland was tear gassed last night while he was meeting with...
About 2 days ago, I was walking up the steps of the Capitol when Representative Yoho suddenly turned a corner, and he was accompanied by Representative Roger Williams, and accosted me on the steps right here in front of our nation's Capitol. I was minding my own business, walking up the steps, and Representative Yoho put his finger in my face. He called me disgusting. He called me crazy. He called me out of my mind. And he called me dangerous. And then he took a few more steps, and after I had recognized his comments as rude, he walked away and said, "I'm rude. You're calling me rude." I took a few steps ahead, and I walked inside and cast my vote, because my constituents send me here each and every day to fight for them and to make sure that they are able to keep a roof over their head, that they're able to feed their families, and that they're able to carry their lives with dignity. I walked back out, and there were reporters in the front of the Capitol, and in front of reporters, Representative Yoho called me, and I quote, "a fucking bitch." These are the words that Representative Yoho levied against a congresswoman, the congresswoman that not only represents New York's 14th congressional district, but every congresswoman and every woman in this country. Because all of us have had to deal with this in some form, some way, some shape, at some point in our lives. And I want to be clear that Representative Yoho's comments were not deeply hurtful or piercing to me, because I have worked a working class job. I have waited tables in restaurants. I have ridden the subway. I have walked the streets in New York City. And this kind of language is not new. I have encountered words uttered by Mr. Yoho and men uttering the same words as Mr. Yoho while I was being harassed in restaurants. I have tossed men out of bars that have used language like Mr. Yoho's. And I have encountered this type of harassment riding the subway in New York City. This is not new, and that is the problem. Mr. Yoho was not alone. He was walking shoulder to shoulder with Representative Roger Williams. And that's when we start to see that this issue is not about one incident. It is cultural. It is a culture of lack of impunity, of accepting of violence and violent language against women, and an entire structure of power that supports that. Because not only have I been spoken to disrespectfully, particularly by members of the Republican Party and elected officials in the Republican Party, not just here, but the President of the United States last year told me to go home to another country, with the implication that I don't even belong in America. The governor of Florida, Governor DeSantis, before I even was sworn in, called me a whatever that is. Dehumanizing language is not new. And what we are seeing is that incidents like these are happening in a pattern. This is a pattern of an attitude towards women and dehumanization of others. So while I was not deeply hurt or offended by little comments that are made, when I was reflecting on this, I honestly thought that I was just going to pack it up and go home. It's just another day, right? But then yesterday, Representative Yoho decided to come to the floor of the House of Representatives and make excuses for his behavior. And that I could not let go. I could not allow my nieces, I could not allow the little girls that I go home to, I could not allow victims of verbal abuse and worse to see that excuse, and to see our Congress accept it as legitimate and accept it as an apology, and to accept silence as a form of acceptance. I could not allow that to stand, which is why I am rising today to raise this point of personal privilege. And I do not need Representative Yoho to apologize to me. Clearly, he does not want to. Clearly, when given the opportunity, he will not. And I will not stay up late at night waiting for an apology from a man who has no remorse over calling women and using abusive language towards women. But what I do have issue with is using women, wives, and daughters as shields and excuses for poor behavior. Mr. Yoho mentioned that he has a wife and 2 daughters. I am 2 years younger than Mr. Yoho's youngest daughter. I am someone's daughter too. My father, thankfully, is not alive to see how Mr. Yoho treated his daughter. My mother got to see Mr. Yoho's disrespect on the floor of this house towards me on television. And I am here because I have to show my parents that I am their daughter and that they did not raise me to accept abuse from men. Now, What I am here to say is that this harm that Mr. Yoho tried to levy against me was not just an incident directed at me. But when you do that to any woman, what Mr. Yoho did was give permission to other men to do that to his daughters. In using that language in front of the press, he gave permission to use that language against his wife, his daughters, women in his community. And I am here to stand up to say that is not acceptable. I do not care what your views are. It does not matter how much I disagree or how much it incenses me or how much I feel that people are dehumanizing others. I will not do that myself. I will not allow people to change and create hatred in our hearts. And so what I believe is that having a daughter does not make a man decent. Having a wife does not make a decent man. Treating people with dignity and respect makes a decent man. And when a decent man messes up, as we all are bound to do, he tries his best and does apologize. Not to save face, not to win a vote. He apologizes genuinely to repair and acknowledge the harm done so that we can all move on. Lastly, what I want to express to Mr. Yoho is gratitude. I want to thank him for showing the world that you can be a powerful man and accost women. You can have daughters and accost women without remorse. You can be married and accost women. You can take photos and project an image to the world of being a family man and accost women without remorse and with a sense of impunity. It happens every day in this country. It happened here on the steps of our nation's capital. It happens when individuals who hold the highest office in this land admit to hurting women and using this language against all of us.
Now, that is one of the most powerful speeches I've heard on the floor protesting the effects of sexism and all the other isms. That was a perfectly written speech. And by the way, Radnin, you can go ahead and go to egbertowillies.com. I have the transcripts there right under the video that I did today. No, she's not saying that people cannot change. She's actually talking about, go read the transcript so that you can get a better idea. But it was a very, very well-written speech by AOC. I could not have, I don't know anybody that could have done it any better. And that woman behind her was crying. And the reason why is like, at last, somebody said, I am not going to just turn my cheek and accept it just not to raise hell. I'm going to do something about it. And that's what she did. And in the process, he looked like a little man. A very little man that a petite, young Latina would make him look like a piece of, no, not make him look like let him look like the piece of crap that he is. Because that is all he is. And all of his cohorts that have done what they've done, not just to women, but to this darn country, that is who they are. Anyhow, moving on, we have a great interview. Let's go ahead and get busy. I explain it all within the interview proper. Let's go. Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Run. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being with us today. I have Russell Heath with us today. Listen, Russell is a novelist. He wrote a great novel, but he was also formerly a lobbyist. And you know, at Politics Done Right, that is all we do, all we talk about. Russell Heath, welcome aboard. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me.
Well, look, first of all, before we get into the politics, before we get into the books, did I read something about you that you jumped on a boat and ran around the world on a boat almost by yourself?
Sailed, actually. I didn't do much running. Yeah,
Well,
the I had this beautiful little boat. If I'd known we were going to be video, I'd show you a picture of it. But it's a 25-foot wooden boat, classic wooden boat designed in the 30s. And I sailed her from Alaska all the way down to Ecuador, out to the Galapagos, across the Pacific, across the Indian, and across the Atlantic. It took me 4 years.
wow. Did you have to plan that out to know where you're going to stop, for the different ports, that sort of thing, or?
Well, not really. And you just went to the next island. Um, Here's the deal with the boats. You have two things you have to worry about: which way the wind is blowing, and when do the hurricanes come. So around the equator in the tropics, the winds blow from east to west. So that's the direction you go. You go west, and the hurricanes are there, in the summer and the late fall. So you don't want to be in the water when the hurricanes are there. So otherwise, you can just go where you want.
So you park the boat somewhere whenever it's hurricane season?
No, I would leave the tropics.
Oh, you
So
leave
for
the
instance,
tropics. Okay.
When I was in the Pacific, I went down to New Zealand during the hurricane season.
Nice, nice. Let me tell you, that was impressive. In all the stuff that I read about you when I saw the boat, I'm like, oh, this guy is also sort of a challenging kind of a guy. He likes to give himself a challenge. But I guess if you were a lobbyist in Alaska, why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
All right. So I represented the environmental community in the state legislature there. So the organization was called the Alaska Environmental Lobby, and I ran that for a legislative session. And Alaska is a conservative state, to put it mildly, and so it's a losing battle, right? So the battles are, how can you lose the least? Every once in a while, you might want to win one. You might win one, and we won a tremendous battle when I was there. And part of that battle is in my book, Rin's Crossing, right? Just peripherally, but yeah. I learned a lot about politics, and I learned about how to gum up the works, and I learned that actually there are a lot of really good people in the legislature.
Well, you know what is interesting? When your publicist said he was a lobbyist, he's really deep into politics and he got things done. My first thought was lobbyists, and the first thing that come across with lobbyists is sort of on the negative. But in your case, you were lobbying for something good. So, I mean, you were lobbying, I think, also for the environment, right?
I lobbied for the Alaskan environmental community in the state legislature. Okay, so as you said, I think that I was on the side of the angels for that. But I also want to say that I think it was only partially of what I needed to lobby for. Because if we don't have a cultural consensus on, say, having the environment being clean and healthy, right? Eventually the people will vote against us. So how is it that we get a cultural consensus? We have to develop a platform that speaks to a lot of different people, not just other environmentalists. And that was really my concern about being just an environmental lobbyist.
That is profound, actually. You are likely the first I don't want to call you an environmentalist, but somebody concerned about the environment that actually took that perspective. In other words, you're doing something that we talk about here at Politics Done Right a lot, and that is getting buy-in based on your own the things that will ultimately interest you, and that is what you have to get on, and that is what gives these things staying power and permanence, right?
Yeah, I agree. And it's, look what Donald Trump has done. He's pretty much wiped out everything that Obama did in 8 years.
Right.
And the only thing that stops politicians from doing that, right, is when there's a consensus in the body politic among the people in the street that we need to keep those things, right? So when Eisenhower came in as Republican, all the Republicans wanted to get rid of Social Security. But by that time, Social Security was supported by so many people, Eisenhower was smart enough not to fight that battle. So the question we have as environmentalists is, how do we make an environmental message speak to, Jane and Joe in the street? How do we make an environmental message important to them?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is that, let's just take an example. So we stopped logging in the Pacific Northwest. And I think that was a good thing by using the spotted owl, which is on an endangered species. So we stopped all this logging for a little owl about this big, right? And who do you think all those loggers voted for in the next election? They didn't vote for our guy, right? And who do you think the neighbors of those loggers voted for in the next election? Because their neighbors are now out of work. Well, they didn't vote for our guy. And if we don't win elections, we lose everything, right? So my concern about the environmental community, or actually one of my concerns about the left as a whole, is it's balkanized. We have gay rights over here. We have Black Lives Matter over here. We have the environment over here, right? Where we really need a unifying message.
I need to ask you a question, because I read the Green New Deal, and what I loved about the Green New Deal specifically is that the way it handled things is, I think it looked at the blueprint that you just gave is pretty much in there. In other words, it's trying to say, we're going to do this, but we're not going to lose the jobs. We're going to do this, and you're going to see it. Poor people and all these other people are going to see a benefit from having thought about the environment, whether it's within your homes, whether it is within the forest. All these things seem so as far as the Green New Deal is concerned, I would say that it took a lot of your concerns into account. Am I right?
Yes. The reason why the bad guys win is they're the only ones with an agenda that speaks to the people in the street. The Green New Deal, and I don't know if you are aware of the Apollo Alliance, the blue-green coalition. That is how we're going to be most effective, is when we're speaking to a larger segment of the community, instead of just environmentalists.
Help me out. I've not heard of the Blue-Green Alliance.
Well, so the blue, of course, are blue-collar workers, and the green, of course, are environmentalists.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Right. So often, the greens and the blue and the workers are against each other.
Right.
Like in Alaska, they have these multi-billion-dollar rape and ruin projects, but those bring, those provide
jobs,
for people who need jobs. And so we really need to think in the kind of a broader sense.
I like that. That is actually, I think that is the message that we have to get out here. And this segment that we're doing here, I think it's informative to a lot of folks, because when you talk about the balkanization and everybody having their own little silos that they act out of in the progressive movement, we've talked a lot on Politics Done Right about working together, and I think you've encapsulated quite well there. Anyhow, Kirkus Review calls it a riveting page turner. Publisher Weekly says it is suspenseful, and it's a finalist in 2 international competitions. Are you surprised at the positive critical response to it's a fairly new book, Rinse Crossing?
Yes. So yeah, it's my second novel, and my surprise, no, I'm certainly gratified. I wrote this book because I wanted a book that was really well written, where we paid a lot of attention to character and the use of the prose. So much genre is pretty poor. And at the same time had a ripping story. So a lot of literary fiction doesn't have a story, right? And I wanted to put the two together. I want to have a really good story and a really well-written novel. And so I spent a lot of time on it. And I can see by the reviews that it's speaking to a lot of people.
So I tell you what, give us tell me a little bit about what the book is about, and then I'm going to want to tie that into your real-based experience as a lobbyist.
Okay, great. So it's about three friends in Alaska, and they're bound together by their love of Alaska, but they all have a different vision of what Alaska should look like. And as the forces in the state start tearing the state apart, each of these 3 friends choose a different side, and then they betray each other because it's more important to them that their vision of Alaska holds. So for instance, one of the friends is an Alaska native, and there are a lot of Alaska natives, about 15% of the population, and some of the things that were promised them, this might surprise you, they never got, right?
Oh,
so
really?
I knew
like the 40 acres and a mule that the American black folk were promised?
So So one of the things that they were promised back when their land claims were settled in 1971 was that they would have a preference for subsistence resources, so hunting, fishing, gathering. So they would have a native preference, and that has never been realized in Alaska. It's now, 40 years later, 50 years later now. So it's called the Subsistence Amendment because they have to amend the state constitution. But that amendment, which the natives support, right, conflicts with people who say, wait a minute, we're all Americans. Why should you guys have special rights? Okay. And when the natives get a lot of their land allotments, what they do, of course, is they exploit the resources. So the natives are the biggest clear cutters and loggers in Alaska, right? So then you have the environmentalists over here who don't want the forest cut. And you can see it's a fight. And that's what the novel's about. About.
And now you said I think you said there were three conflicts, three different directions. So one of the directions, the native who wants control, the other direction, the environmentalist. What's the third?
Well, the third is an old environmentalist who's given up. He's the nihilist in the sense that he just realizes the attack on Alaska is relentless and there's nothing he can do. So he commits a crime. He sabotages a native corporation logging camp, and his sweetie, who's the environmentalist, gets charged with his crime.
Right.
So he's got to figure out how to get her off the hook without ending up in jail himself.
But interesting, and I imagine there's a whole lot of intrigue around that if you want to get it, folks, get the book, Prince Crossing. But now you set this book in Alaska. Do you live in Alaska right now, or have you moved on?
No, I can you see out there?
That's beautiful.
I'm in the backwoods of Maine. I'm living in a little log cabin. Here's my wood stove.
Oh, and that's your real home.
That's my real home. And so I left Alaska in 2010 because I wanted to live in a big city. I wanted more frenzy in my life. And Juneau's only 30,000 people. And,
right.
And there's a lot going on for 30,000 people, but there's a lot more going on in New York City. So I lived in New York City for a while, and then I couldn't get a job. So I retreated to this cabin here on the coast of Maine. I've been here for 5 years.
Wow. So, but there's a sort of a similarity between that and Alaska in the summer, I guess.
Well, it gets cold here in the winter too.
Well, that's true. That's true. You're out there kind of pretty north in Maine. Now, so what made you choose Alaska as the place where you wanted to have this adventure? I mean, people who think of big adventures and intrigues, I don't know that they really think that Alaska is the place,
What are they missing? Well, first of all, I love Alaska. I hitchhiked up there when I was a teenager in 1974. Ended up working in the pipeline as well as the legislature. And Alaska is an extraordinary place. It is truly, truly an extraordinary place. The thing is that most of us were fighting for comfort, convenience, and safety. Those are the three things we want. We want everything easy, and we want to be safe. And when that happens, when you have comfort, convenience, and safety, life is a little boring. There's no challenge, there's no risk, there's no threat. And the joy and love of living in Alaska is that it's a challenge. It's a challenge to survive at 40 below. It's a challenge to climb those big mountains, right? And it's truly awe-inspiring, the beauty. So in Alaska, unlike other places, it really kind of molds a person's character. Who you are changes because you live in Alaska. And Alaskans get really ideological about what they want Alaska to be. And by ideological, I mean they get really committed to a certain vision that they have of Alaska. And it's this vision, this competing vision that different Alaskans have that really drives the story. So I wanted it set in Alaska because of the challenge and the adventure, the exoticness of it, but because, people get upset. They have conflicts. They fight over what they want Alaska to be.
Now, you had to do a whole lot of research on this book. And again, you were a lobbyist, so you kind of roamed the capital in, where is it? Juneau, I think is the capital, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
In Juneau. So you kind of know how things happen. Did you have to do much research, or was it enough that you knew how the political machine actually works on the state level?
So both. So one of the driving forces through the book, I haven't really talked about it, is a package of bills that will give the natives what they want, the subsistence amendment, right? And that's what the left wants. And then a package of bills that the right wants, right? And for the left to get what they want and the right to get what they want, the whole thing has to pass, all right? So it's this big sausage, big compromise. And so one, I knew a lot about how the legislature worked, but also when I was a lobbyist, I'm a really good listener, like you are, really good listener. And I'd sit around with these legislators and they would tell me stories thinking that it would never get into print. So every dirty trick, every manipulation in the book, except the very last one,
right,
happened in Alaskan history. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of people that are probably very thankful that I changed some names.
that was the next question that I was going to ask. Did you kind of protect these folks that you don't want them to have a hit on you or something, you know?
Yeah. Even some of the very, well, there's some legislators, now long retired, who might read this book and say, oh, that's what happened to my bill. Because some of the dirty tricks are my own.
Oh, and they're real.
Oh, absolutely.
So a lot of your book actually has some real incidents with enough of a fictional base to make it kind of dubious.
Well, to hide the culprits, yes.
To hide the culprits. Now, is law in your book, according to what I understand you have in there, is a lot of people think that lobbying is corrupt, but you think that it's not necessarily so in neither direction, actually, based on the characters.
Well,
it's perspective.
Yeah. I think politicians get a bad rap.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. And lobbyists. So politics is the process by which we work out our different values and our different interests. And it's essential in a social, social animals. It's essential. Okay. So, I mean, you go into wolf pack and it's the biggest and the baddest that determines what happens, right? But in humans, you got to have politics. And so I think politics are, politicians are providing a really good service, when politics is done right. And it often looks from afar as if it's corrupt because people are fighting over their interests and, it's self-interest, but that's okay. That's okay. Hang on one second. The only human community that doesn't have politics, it's a graveyard.
Actually, you know what? That's true. But I want to frame the question a bit differently. I think I disagree with you when you say, politicians get a bad rap. I think before Citizens United, that may have been true. Okay? Before Buckley Vallejo, I think that would have been right. But I think that politics no longer involve all the true, what do you call that person that has a stakeholders. I think at this current time, politics doesn't involve all the stakeholders. And in that case, I think it defies what you just said as far as it's how we make the sausage, because a lot of parts of the sausage makers aren't there. Well,
I would say that's not the fault of the politicians. It's fault of the system in which we play the game of politics.
Question. Let me, because I think you're right.
Yeah.
No, question. It's a part of, is it the system or is it the audience? Meaning, is it that we, the everyday voter, have given up or not done our duty? Our one vote really matters.
No, you're absolutely right. Ultimately, the responsibility lies with us, right? And, again, it comes back to if you want to win, again, I'll just use the environmentalists as an example. So a lot of environmental victories happen in the court system. And they almost always happen over little nits of administrative law right? So you have this decision, like this big dam is not allowed to go forward because of some little fish called a snail darter. And most people in the street say that's crazy. This is a multi-billion dam that's going to create megawatts of electricity for a bloody snail darter. Who cares about a snail darter? So if you have your battles in a courtroom, you don't bring the people along with you. And if you don't bring the people along with you, they're not going to vote for you. And if you don't vote for you, you get Donald Trump. So the deal is for the left, certainly the environmental community, but I'm not going to limit to the environmental community. Too much of our work has left the streets. We need to be back on the streets, knocking on doors and working with people. I mean, the whole grievance vote that Donald Trump got, all those, whites who we're calling racist, which, you're never going to get them to vote for you if you're calling them a racist. Mm-hmm. So all those people should have been on our side. Those are people we need to be working. They're suffering from the loss of jobs and rusted out communities. They've got drug addictions. Their life expectancy is going down. Those are the people on the left that we should be dealing with, but we've lost them.
And you should have listened to my show yesterday. That's what we talk about. Me talking about going to the right and talking to my right brothers and sisters. I have this phrase that I tell folks all the time. Oh, some of my best friends are racist. And people get back and they're, what do you mean? And I'm like, look, I can actually talk to these folks and I can actually inform these folks. I'm a little bit concerned of those of faith, because that one is a higher thing to crack. If their faith is causing them to have some values that affect what we think is best for us all. Thoughts on that? I'm curious.
Well, I think the word racist right now is used in a way that's very divisive. Mm-hmm. Our ultimate goal is to bring people together, not split them apart. And there's some really nasty things that are going on to people of color, but just take, for example, say you're a white boy growing up in a mobile home in Appalachia. Your dad's gone, your mother's strung out on opioids, and you were weaned on Mountain Dew. What does white patriarchy mean to him? Zippo. That's
the battle.
If we call him a racist and we call him a white patriarchal, we've lost him.
Right.
We should be in there on his side, right? Because he's not living a life of justice in any respect.
Russell, Russell, that is such an important concept that you put out there. There are a couple of writers that have talked about that where they say, but if I put that guy in a suit and I go in a suit for a job, he still has a better opportunity than I do. But you have to try to form that in a frame that takes his pain into consideration. I always talk about the gradation of pain.
Right.
When you talk about the gradation of pain, it's a losing battle to do that, right? I can forget, and the reason I use a concept when I talk about racists are my friends and that sort of stuff, the reason I use that concept is because what I want to prove is I use that, and people get mad at me for saying that, but I use it as an attribute. In other words, being fat averse is also an attribute that some people have. Being there are so many things that's there. So I think it's important. What you just mentioned is it's important for people to understand. It's important for the left to understand how they're going to really win over people. I have this other phrase that I use whenever we unite Appalachia, the ghettos, and the barrios. It's very stereotypical, right? But it's the truth, isn't it? The barrios, the ghettos, and Appalachia has more in common than me and Donald Trump, right?
And so it comes back to your question about, the system in which we're working. In a way, I think that the left, again, balkanized, we've divided ourselves. So we've lost some of our natural constituency, which put Donald Trump in power. Right. And also, the people with money and corporate power, there are not many of them, but if we divide us, they can conquer. And then we get, we get these crazy election laws, and money counts as free speech, and pretty soon you can't compete anymore because you don't have $1 billion.
That is absolutely true. Russell, before we get out of here, tell me something that you had wished I had asked you that in my lack of wisdom, I did not.
First of all, great interview. I really enjoyed being here with you and getting me all excited. So what you didn't ask me is, what are some of my dirty tricks? What
are some of your dirty tricks, Russell?
All right. Well, I can't tell you because I will give it away. Again, the book's Rinse Crossing, and I don't want to give away any of the dirty tricks that I played in the book, but there's several there that were mine. But I'll tell you one that I couldn't squeeze in.
Okay.
All right. So really quick here. It was towards the end of the legislative session, and I discovered on a Friday that the Senate Resources Committee was going to hear a pro-mining bill. All right. So that meant that I would have to spend the entire weekend organizing, calling people up to get them to come and testify against the bill. Now understand that we could never win. All we can do is make it less bad, right? And here's the kicker. Southeast Alaska is a rainforest. It rains there all the time. And this weekend, there are not going to be any clouds in the sky. And you don't understand that Southeast Alaskans will kill their kittens. They'll sacrifice their kittens to get outside on a beautiful day. All right. So here I was Friday afternoon thinking, oh my God, I have to spend my whole weekend calling people to get them to testify against this bill, which wouldn't do a damn thing anyway. So I said, I'm not going to play by the rules. So I called up a friend in the Senate Minority Leaders, a Democrat, Senate Minority Leader's office, and said, you know, Rosemary, I'm thinking of like running into that committee room on Monday and dumping a pail of dead fish on the committee table. And there'd just been this big fish kill in the creek that the mine was right on. So everybody, it would have been very appropriate. And she goes, oh. So I hang up and she goes, tells her boss, the senator, minority leader, says, Jim, the Greenies are going to dump a pile of dead fish on the committee table, in House and Senate Resources on Monday. And Jim, Senator Duncan, calls up the chair of the committee, who was Republican, Mike Miller, and says, oh, you wouldn't believe what the Greenies are going to do. And Mike Miller panicked. He canceled the meeting and he called the state troopers. And I played all weekend in the sun.
That was a dirty trick and it played out just right for you, man.
It did.
Hey, tell us how folks can find your website, your book, all that good stuff so that we can get it to you, man.
All right. So I really encourage folks to read this book. This is really exciting. You will not be able to put it down, and it's very unique. There's not another legislative thriller that I know of, and this legislative thriller is like a police procedural. It'll take you through the legislative process, and it's exciting. It is not boring. So Rinse Crossing, you can Google Rinse Crossing, Russell Heath, and I will pop right up. My website is russellheathauthor.net. Of course, the book's on Amazon. And if you read it, send me a note. I'd really like to know what you think. And particularly about the moral quandaries, because, the most difficult fights are rights versus rights. It's not good versus evil. Mm-hmm. It's when you have two rights, two goods fighting each other. And that's what I have in the novel.
Russell Heath, I must say I enjoyed this interview. I also really love your perspective. I hope you keep doing what you do. And I think you're out there in Maine. You may have to jump down here and get involved, a bit more active with a lot of that advice that you have, folk. I mean, I tell you, that is some good words. My name is Egberto Willies. I want to thank Russell Heath for having been with Politics Done Right. Have a great day.
Hey, thanks, Alberto. Ciao.
All right, folks. I hope you enjoyed that. We have about, 2 minutes. Let's see if I have anything here. I need to welcome my folks. Dimitri OG, welcome aboard. Michael Rudnin, AVQ. Norman Reynolds, Bruce Pollard, AVQ. Kathy Courtney. Let's see, who else did I? Christine Park. Para Charles C. Welcome aboard. Jason 4. Let's see who else is here. Let's see if I miss anybody. Just send me another note. Kathy Courtney. Okay, the trolley quandary. You remember that some of my vocabulary that may miss, Mr. Pollard. So you may have to give me a little explanation on that one. Anyhow, let's see. I saw somebody calling AOC. Oh yeah, Michael Rudden said what the guy said was a Freudian slip when he called when he rightly called the guys protesters and then had to hurry up and call them criminals. We also have somebody, Christine Park says they love to talk about democratic cities, but they never mention that those cities are under the red state governments that make the cities, such as the city of Nashville, under what again? Exactly. Such like the city of all the cities in Texas, under red. Exactly right. All right, let's see what else. Stephanie Hartlin, welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. Para ver quién más tengo. Norman says, use your words. Apologies can be made, but it may not be accepted. The victim of a wrong can hold the perpetrator responsible forever. Absolutely so. Bruce also says, if a new world we have to learn in a new world, we have to learn how to respect anyone who stands to speak in support of a better world. They should be polite, and we should be polite and work to get the job done. Not call names. Women should be accepted as totally equal and valuable contributors to our societies. This is not a man's world. It is our world. Exactly. And the thing about it is, we say women should be this, women should be that. We shouldn't have to, we learned it all wrong for those of us that are older, that is, we learned it all wrong growing up based on the Bible, the Quran, and the Torah. We learned all the wrong things because, they wanted, even though we know now that those things were wrong, we got to make sure and live it through. Robert Lysick, Trump killing the Constitution since 2016. Yes, I believe you. I believe that. And Robert Lysick also say the Trump flu is real. Yes, the Trump flu is real. Let's see. You're coming in from Facebook. The others coming in from, YouTube. Okay, it's News Junkie Politics. Let's see. Oh, Charles C. said, get over it, snowflake. And Michael Rudden had a apropos response. But anyhow, folks, we got to get out of here. But before we get out of here, I got to go ahead and say, please, folks, consider becoming subscribers to Politics Done Right. That is how we can keep this stuff going. Please visit us at politicsdoneright.com/Patreon to become one of our patrons via Patreon. That is, by the way, Patreon is spelled Patreon. Patreon. So that is politicsdoneright.com/Patreon. You can also support us via PayPal, and that is politicsdoneright.com/PayPal. And you can support us via, we just got permission to start accepting subscriptions at Facebook. It's kind of meager right now at Facebook. I would love to start building that Facebook community with a group that has amenities in there. I think we only have 5 right now. I'd love to get a hell of a lot more. Let's get it up to 50. Let's get Facebook up to 50. How can you do that? Visit politicsdoneright.com/Facebook. Again, that is politicsdoneright.com/Facebook. You can also shop at our store. And how do you get to our store? Oh, I didn't click OK on Facebook. There we go. On Facebook. How do you get to our store? You go to politicsdoneright.com/what again? Store. Notice how I changed those links. I created aliases for them so that it's easy for all of us to remember. And if you want to support our fund for our equipment fund, meaning, well, right now, we don't need the cellular and all of that, but eventually we're going to want a cellular and all that kind of stuff to go out there in the field. But that is politicsdoneright.com/GoFundMe. Folks, we know that you have places to go. Oh, what do you get at our store? What do you get at our store? Of course, you can get our book, As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. And for those of you who remember that I've had weight problems, solve them, lose weight, and be fit now. And of course, you can get Le Cup, La Taza. Pueden conseguir mi taza cuando quieren también, my cup. And we have T-shirts, all that good stuff that I'm going to put on the screen right now. You can actually see our Politics Done Right shirt. We even have it with the AOC clan. What do they call them? The Squad. We created a cup with the Squad. We created T-shirts with the Squad. All that good stuff that you can get to show support for independent media, to show support for progressive media, to show support for all that we do. Again, we got to get out of here. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you know how I generally end this baby. I simply say, I am what? Out! I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel, and please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.